At the height of the pandemic, Dr. Nick Coatsworth was a voice of calm, reason and reassurance. But as we have learned during this tour of regional towns, often there are things going on behind the scenes that no one really knows about, and you still have to front up and do your job and put on a brave face. You'll recognise the man and the name. Dr. Nick Coatsworth joins us now. Nice of you to be with us. Thank you so much. Look, tell everyone at home, if you can, just about your struggles. What led to PTSD?
Yeah, so I went with Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, to some pretty difficult contexts, Congo and Chad, and also the Darfur region of Sudan. And when I was in Darfur, it was a sort of immediate post-conflict situation, and I think everybody has their limits in life, and I kind of reached that. The security situation there was really difficult. There were sort of threats of assassination of people in the place where we were fairly constantly, threats of kidnapping from the militia, the Janjaweed, and once unexploded ordnance went off and the militia sort of invaded the hospital, and I had to evacuate the team out the back. And just that constant pressure for 4.5 months, I started getting these symptoms like I was having a heart attack or palpitations, and I thought that there was genuinely something wrong, but it was anxiety at the time.
Because you didn't realise the triggers at that point, you were just going through tremendous stress and trying to do your job with Doctors Without Borders, and focusing on that job, you didn't pay attention to yourself a little?
No, I didn't pay attention to myself. I got back and I thought that I should get some counselling, but the thing is, once you've been through those experiences, if you get back to normal life, it recedes. But for me, it didn't recede completely, and it came back again with a vengeance, those symptoms, when I was working right here in Canberra.
So for people watching at home now who would be familiar with it, that's one thing, but those who aren't, what are those things? Because you're about to take on and explain a very significant role during the pandemic, but you're dealing with this stuff on the side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I felt like I was having these heart palpitations. I was literally taking my pulse all the time to make sure I was still around. It was very bizarre sort of stuff to do. But then, at the end of 2019, it got to the point where one weekend I couldn't actually leave the house. I was literally sitting there. I was actually binging on Nordic noir crime thrillers to try and deal with it, which was pretty maladaptive, to be honest. But, the point was that I needed help, and it was only through a lot of convincing from my wife, Rebecca, that I actually got help from my general practitioner.
How were you day to day? Were you dealing with emotion as well? And how was she?
Well, day to day it was tough. I mean, I felt as though I couldn't go onto the wards at the hospital. It was an effort to get onto the wards. I was probably more snappy with the kids and with family life. And then the big signal for me was that I started getting angry, not with a lot, but on occasion with some work colleagues, which is something that I never ever do. And then of course there was the actual moment where I couldn't actually get out of the house. And when it starts interfering with your life like that, Karl, that's when you know that you need help from a mental health point of view.
You couldn't physically get out of the house?
No, I couldn't get out of the house.
Explain that.
I was lying in bed. I thought I was so anxious that I thought it was like an agoraphobic response where you feel like you need to stay as safe as possible. So you're just lying in there in bed, and
paralysed.
Well, I mean socially paralysed, and so I needed to get help from a general practitioner, psychologist, and ultimately I needed to be medicated for about a year.
So how close was all of this happening to the pandemic, and then obviously your role as Deputy Chief Medical Officer? What was the crossover there?
Yeah, well, it was close. I mean, this was the end of 2019, and I started the pandemic job in 2020, in March of 2020. So I would say I was recovering at the time. I mean, it's lucky because the sort of job that floats my boat is obviously something that has a lot of adrenaline attached to it. But at the same time, I had to balance that with sort of recovering from a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress.
Do you accept that it may have been too close, or were you okay by then?
No, I think I was certainly on the road to recovery and probably okay. But it was probably the first time that I'd really questioned. When I got the call from Paul Kelly, probably the first time that I'd stopped and thought, should I be doing this job? And I had to go on and do it, of course, but it was a tough decision.
Did you have times during that period in that role where you thought it's coming back again, or were you by then?
No, by then I was actually on some medication for it, for the anxiety. And, I think one of the main messages is that you got to listen to the people who know you.
Yeah.
I had to listen to my wife. It took me a lot of convincing to actually go and see a GP, to see a psychologist, to be medicated for this. I'm not medicated anymore, but I know what the triggers are.
It's really, it's incredibly powerful you telling this story, because I know there are people out there who don't know what to do. Even talking about medication, it's one of those things people don't want to talk about. Here we have, one of the most high-profile Australians, a smart, very capable man, seemingly impenetrable with confidence, and inside a little broken.
Well, we're all a little broken. I think we've got to admit that. And the thing is, if it starts affecting your day-to-day life, that's when you need to get help. But also when people are telling you, if someone who you love is telling you that you need to get help, that is not the time to be refusing or saying no. It's the time to, let down your guard, admit that you're like everybody, you're not bulletproof.
How do you do that?
You just got to say yes. It's the biggest hurdle, Karl. The biggest hurdle is admitting that you need help first.
You've spoken about Ben Cousins as well. You went to school with him. Another example?
Well, I think all of us have needed help with various mental health issues. Benny's was related to addiction. It was a much longer battle, although, in fairness, both of us probably had our own mental health battles over many years. And he's come out of it on the other side.
It's so good to see.
And it's so good to see. But again, another high-profile Australian, I think the message to all Australians, whether you're high-profile or you've never been on telly before but you're watching today, is if it's starting to affect your day-to-day life and how you interact with your friends, your family, your job's not feeling very good, and that's the issue. That's when to go out and get some assistance. Best assistance from your general practitioner, and he or she will refer you to psychologists and the various people who can help.
Look, I appreciate you coming on and telling this story, because it is incredibly powerful coming from you. I read over the weekend too that you were thinking about going into politics. Are you sure? I can counsel you on that in the nation's capital, what's going on in politics right now, and you want to go into politics? Come on!
I suspect that wouldn't be great for my mental health.
Yeah.
But I think we've got to recognise the stresses on politicians as well,
Yeah.
from both sides of the House, independents, and that is a stressful job.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen politicians. John Brogden's a very powerful advocate for mental health. We, as I said, Karl, we're not bulletproof. The guys over there and the girls over there on the hill are not bulletproof. Yeah. And we all need to help each other.
You sound like a politician already. You haven't answered the question.
I didn't answer the question.
Yay or nay?
Very clever. I didn't answer the question.
Come on! Well, if anyone could go into it and make a difference, you'd be the guy to do it. I appreciate
that,
being here today. You're a great part of our Today Show family.
Thanks,
and
mate.
for you to do that is really a great expression of where you're at, and also people are going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I hope it's helped the viewers.
And this week we're seeing it all, from Shepparton through to Wagga Wagga to here in Canberra, and what you've explained is what people are going through out there. So thank you again for sharing it.
Pleasure, mate.
Well, lovely fella. We'll have more of Today's Show in Canberra live right after this.